My Queen's Court question of the day is obviously related to Tackle 25. And like you said, Matt, earlier, the Tackle 25 is called the Tackle 25, but we do have other segments, if you will. We have the dividends firework, the DSM list, and the Poor Boys Covered Call. So, and I know you're going to go into great length and detail in the podcast and on the show tomorrow. So I'm going to put the Tackle 25 list aside for now. And I want to specifically talk about the DSM list. And, you actually even talked about this earlier when we're looking at Amazon. Amazon is on the DSM list. It didn't make the Tackle 25 list for obviously reasons, for the obvious reasons of fundamentals, but it's on the DSM list, right? So I have to do this.
Yeah.
And I know you spend a lot of time and effort going through it, but for someone like me who does a lot of cash flow with the Tackle 25 list, and I'm looking to kind of venture out here and, have that Goldilocks sweet spot where I've got a balance of Tackle 25, but now I'm looking to do some dividend fireworks, DSM list, and Poor Boys Covered Call. On that DSM list, what's that one stock that is just stood out to you? Like, which one from that list stood out to you, and kind of talk to us about why that was?
That's a fantastic question. It's like asking me which one's my favorite kid.
Yeah,
right?
I know. Like, I'm putting you in the spot.
No. It's a fantastic question. I'm just trying to collect my thoughts looking at the list right now. Honestly,
can I tell you which ones I was looking at, or what I had in mind, or what?
Well, I'm debating three in my head, and I'm trying to discount I'm trying to just focus on the newcomers.
They're all great.
I'll tell you the one that stood out. I'll tell you there was one that had a tremendous amount of conversation on.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to another one that I'm excited about a little bit this year. But the one that had a tremendous amount of conversation on was VIPS. VIPS is like a Chinese version e-commerce Amazon light type company. Obviously Chinese
underbelly.
It is Chinese underbelly. This is true. This is true. VIPS was the Tackle 25 one stock, and honestly, it was one of the better stocks on the list that year. And so there has been some history with VIPS on the list. It got removed the following year, but for valuation concerns. But it's a great cash flow stock. Number one. Number two, when you're looking at the fundamental backdrop of these major Chinese companies that are on U.S. markets, and again, one of the things that we do take into account was international companies and their influence on the Tackle 25. We wanted to make sure that it was, quite frankly, that it didn't have, as for the Tackle 25 specifically, that there wasn't a tremendous amount of international influence. There is some of that on dividend fireworks. Excuse me, not on dividend fireworks. There's some of that on Poor Boys. There's some of that on 30 Sexy Money. But Tackle 25, there's only one that has that real, because a lot of, like, Ford has international influence. There's enough international influence on this S&P 500 companies itself without the additional concern of the other international that does happen often. And so we wanted to make sure that there wasn't a lot of Chinese influence on the Tackle 25 core list this year. But there's a lot of analysis that with China opening up, and China's been held back. And when you look at the fund, and what I mean by that, held back, that from a fundamental perspective, some of these companies have been held back a little bit. When you're looking at the pure fundamental nature of some of these stocks, right? And let me pull up FinViz right now. So when you're looking at, say, BABA, for example, and this stood out to me a lot, quite frankly, with a lot of these Chinese stocks, real massively high valuation in the current. All of them did massively high valuation. Even with a lot of their prices coming down aggressively in 2022, still massively overvalued. And one of the reasons why that happened is because, again, think about what happened in the U.S. when the U.S. shut down their economy for, what was it, a 4-week stretch?
Yeah.
China's been shut down for 2 years. And so just artificial caps on their earnings to a certain extent put out there by the government. And again, we all know in the US how that transpired in 2020, times that by 10, and that's what's happening in China. But when you're looking at the forward P ratios as China reopens up their economy, every one of their forward P ratios is really, really, really low right now. Now, take that with a grain of salt, right? The very, very low forward P ratios right now. But at the end of the day, as China opens up, these things have to come back down. The current valuation comes down, the forward P ratio comes up. Yeah. And even in that capacity, you're still talking about a pretty decent value opportunity. Now, because of the current PE ratios, none of these Chinese companies could ever be on the Tackle 25. Tackle 25 has core rules that you can't violate. Like, you just can't. I abide by the rules of the Tackle 25. With DSM, there's a little bit more subjectiveness there because you're talking about growth companies that you feel are going to come into some degree of value down the road. Does that make sense? So whereas you put an emphasis on value in the Tackle 25, the emphasis is on growth in the DSM because you're looking for higher volatility stocks that you have a fundamental viewpoint that could get into some better value down the road based on growth. And so you're looking at it from that perspective. When you're looking at VIPS here, and VIPS is a newcomer to the DSM list this year, and again, has had some influence in the previous years. Out of all the other stocks out of the Chinese influence stocks like Baidu, Baba, VIPS, these types of stocks, right? Out of all of them, I saw all of them had high P ratios, but historically low forward P ratios outside of VIPS. And VIPS had an 11 P ratio with a 1.32 P ratio, a PEG ratio of 86, price to sales of 0.55. It paints its own story. Like, there's no fundamental concern here. And so and I'm talking about from a pure valuation perspective, there's concern of China, certainly, but that's also why you're getting the premium on VIPS that you're getting. And so when you're looking at, say, VIPS, for example, and you're just looking at, say, doing something in the short term, you have a lot of ability to come do styles like boomerang trades. And my anticipation is a lot more option activity is going to happen on these stocks in 2023 than happened in 2022. And so when you're looking at VIPS, you're looking at a boomerang style trade. You're looking at an aggressive covered call. That's DSM. It's boomerang to aggressive covered calls. And you're looking at an environment where you got a stock that, has the premium necessary to be able to get the return needed on the naked put, has the premium necessary to get paid out on a covered call. For example, we'll just go to a 35 delta contract, you're getting about 3%, about 2.5% right now on a 35 delta contract. This is after the stocks went up 100% in the last 2 months, and you're still getting that on a covered call. What happens in neutrality? It goes up. What happens as the stock comes down? Volatility goes up. So VIPS kind of is one that stands out just because of the debate was. There was a big debate on VIPS for DSM, but it was a standout a little bit. And I don't want to go into too many details because I got a lot of thoughts for the conversation tomorrow. But I would say VIPS was a standout there. One of the ones that didn't have a lot of conversation, honestly, was on the list last year, going to be on the list this year, Cleveland-Cliffs. We have a steel company, Steel Dynamics on the Tackle 25, Cleveland-Cliffs on DSM. Nothing has transpired in 2022. And this might seem shocking for some, but nothing has transpired in 2022 to change my perspective of Cleveland-Cliffs. Despite the fact that it went from 34 to 15, nothing's changed. In fact, I think you got a better fundamental backdrop this year than you did last year. And I have the same perspective of Ford. So it's a little bit of a standout. I really like Cleveland-Cliffs coming out the lows here. My eyes struggle with VIPS a little bit, which means you probably want to see a little bit of a better pattern. My eyes really function quite well with things coming off the lows. meaning what do my eyes gravitate to when I'm looking at price action? And so I like Cleveland Cliffs coming off the low, and its naked put to covered call, whereas VIP's got some liquidity concern right now, not a lot, but it does have some liquidity concern. There's none of that in VIP's. In Cleveland Cliffs. You can do whatever you want in Cleveland Cliffs. So I would say that if there's two stocks, polar opposites, one fighting the high price, the other one fighting the low price, one a newcomer, one an existing member, Cleveland Cliffs coming off the low, VIP's working off the highs. I think those two stand out to me today.
Absolutely love it. I had two different ones on my radar here, but I love that you take the time, and I know you're going to elaborate more tomorrow and in the podcast about this list. But I was looking at Paramount and Amazon because Amazon.
Well,
and
and Amazon's working it. Amazon would have been a Tackle 25 member and not Google if it had a better fundamental valuation.
Yep. Answer. And that's why it's on DSM.
And that's why it's on DSM.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't have the fundamentals to be on the Tackle 25. It's really that simple. Para took the opposite approach. Was a Tackle 25 stock, got kicked off, found a home on DSM. Para's one, and we looked at the streamers a lot because streamers are very good cover calls. There's certain areas of the market as you dive into covered call mechanics.
Oh, the streamers are amazing cash flow stocks.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's up there with the gold stocks for me, but it's one of those areas. It's the top 5 area of the market for cover call analysis. And so you definitely want to have a streamer on there. Netflix, too high dollar stock for the Tackle 25, had too high valuation in the short term. But it's certainly a great stock. Para here, it's a fantastic cover call. And quite frankly, I know the volatility, I know the concern with Para, but until Buffett capitulates, I'm not.
Until Buffett capitulates, you got the stamp of approval.
Yeah. Well, and on the backdrop, every streamer outside of Netflix has had this. So
I don't think the old boys capitulated very often.
No, the old dog doesn't capitulate. No, he doesn't do that.